been hungry. We've never known anything but poverty and scuffing those knees. And through all the stress and strife, we've had families and friends tell us everything's gonna be alright. And now that we surface, our mission is to turn our poverty into our paradise. Ha ha! Naughty by Nature's in the house, setting it off with the 1995 flavor. Introducing poverty's paradise. Yeah! And this is the year that we go all out, letting the whole world hear our people's cries, and bringing to surface the years and years of all the wicked lies. And the ultimate goal is to remove all the dirt off of the hands that feed us, and to let the evil recognize that nothing will stop these independent leaders.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. My guest is Peter Lavelle from Crosstalks on RT. Peter, before we ended, you were talking about Ukraine. There are some, especially what I read on alternative media, that Ukraine is leaning more and more towards the right. They have implemented new harsh laws that, for instance, ban Soviet symbols. Just here, 16th of May, I read an article that they try to completely break away with the country's Soviet past and bring the country closer to Europe, but that the critics say that the move severely restricts freedom of speech and will divide society. And I read that the EU calls Russia's NGO law a worrying step.
Okay, let's take them first. The Ukraine situation. You used the term "move to the right." I think you used. No, it's move to fascism. Let's call it what it is. Call things by their name. Mm-hmm. Look at Andrei Poruby, Dmitry Yarosh. Look up those names. These people are fascists, and they're in high positions in the Ukrainian government. The EU condemned such groups and people before the Maidan, and now the silence is deafening. Let's think about this. Before Yanukovych decided not to sign the association agreement, he didn't reject it. Again, this is a Western myth. He just said, "I don't want to sign it now." The EU had threatened Yanukovych with sanctions because Yulia Tymoshenko was in prison for political reasons. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah.
They were going to sanction an entire government and country because one person was sitting in prison. Now we have thousands and thousands of people sitting in prison because of lack of speech, because of their political views, and et cetera, et cetera. Where's the words and the solemn words from Brussels, from European countries, from Sweden? All of you guys, you don't say one word. Thousands of people, 17 people over the last few months have been disappeared, most of them journalists, some of them opposition politicians. Where's the outrage in Europe? Where? People like to use the 1930s, appeasement and all that. Europe is appeasing the political cleansing of Ukraine, and it doesn't say one word. Shame on Europe. Shame on all of you for not raising your voice. I find that really appalling. Now, your second point, the NGO law in Russia. Yes, I'm glad Vladimir Putin signed it. Do you want Victoria Nuland? No, let me rephrase that. We here in Russia don't want Victoria Nuland to come here in the streets of Moscow to hand out her cookies, because that's what American NGOs do. They subvert. Long history of that.
Is this
just go to the National Endowment for Democracy. Just Google that. They're open about their pursuit of regime change in the post-Soviet space.
But we have to agree that civil society's part in protecting a democracy is important.
No, you're mixing up issues here. Foreign-funded NGOs, not NGOs. Again, another Western myth. A small number of Western-funded NGOs, they should not be funding NGOs in Russia. Full stop. Full stop.
If we keep on the topic of Ukraine, they have incredible economic problems. They have been bailed out by the IMF and they're going to take even more loans. Do you think it's possible that we will see a new Maidan or a collapse from within in Kiev?
Yeah, I think, my crystal ball is a bit hazy, and I have so many amazing experts on Ukraine around me. I'm so fortunate I can either talk to them like I am right now with you on Skype or in person, and they also come on my program. I'm quite pessimistic now. I think Ukraine's sovereignty has been forever compromised. I cannot see the Donbass, Lugansk and Donetsk ever really taking orders from Kiev again. You know, on my most optimistic moments would be just the loosest possible confederation. They won't even pay taxes. You know, they'll just stay within this kind of artificial border. I mean, when you have Grat missiles firing at your children and you have to live in a basement, there's no going back. There's no going back. You can't. There's no going back to people that say that Bandera was a great Ukrainian patriot. No, he was involved in vicious ethnic cleansing. He was a participant of genocide. No one in eastern Ukraine is going to say, oh yeah, we can overlook that. They did before. Now they won't. The economic situation. Look, Russia doesn't need Ukraine. It'll get over in the next few years. It will repair whatever damage the trade that will play out. But Ukraine desperately needs Russia. And you know, why would you want to be sitting in Moscow when you see these really pathetic characters like Poroshenko and Yatsenyuk go to the United States and say, we need more arms so we can go kill these people in the East? You know, why the Russians will just say, look, you know, why should we help you? You're killing ethnic Russians in the East, and you call them, you know, cockroaches. They're subhuman. It's extraordinary how the regime in Kiev adopts a Nazi rhetoric when it comes to race. And no one in the East, in the West, has the guts to stand up and say, we don't accept that kind of language in the 21st century. That's what we heard in the 30s and the 40s. But no, where is the moral fortitude of the West right now? You know, that this is something Western media so fundamentally misunderstands, is that the Russians, everything Western media says about Russia is instantly translated into Russian, and people from high classes to low, educated and not so well educated, city and urban and rural, they all read this, and they are just outraged by what is said about their country and their leaders. It's really appalling. You all think that, you know, we just live in this little bubble world and worship Putin. Well, no, we don't. We have very normal, regular lives. Putin's greatest ambition is to transform this country into a modern country. It doesn't need to recreate the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was a huge net loss for Russia in every sense, culturally, economically, politically. I don't know anyone that wants the return of the Soviet Union. That is just, these are fantasies in Western capitals in Western media.
You probably heard about the Arctic Challenge exercise that are taking place now in northern Sweden. It's huge. We have 115 aircrafts and 3,600 personnel. 9 countries, 6 of whom are NATO countries. At the same time, Russia begins a huge surprise Air Force drill, which is 4 times as large, and the 3rd major military exercise staged by Kremlin in the past 3 months. We have 250 aircrafts and 12,000 service personnel. Are these military exercises a cause of concern, and what message do they send to each other?
Look, I don't think anyone in those ships and planes want to get into a shooting war. I really doubt that. There are people like John McCain, Lindsey Graham in the United States, and kind of lunatic senators, you know, fringe people. They want war. Their children will never die in the war, and whatever war happens, they at least each one of them has 7 or 8 houses across the United States. They'll find a place to stay. The thing is, it's at no cost to them to talk about warmongering. War is the U.S. cannot win any war anymore. It can't. Modern warfare is a failure for political change. All you do is flatten countries and create amazing humanitarian crises, but you don't create new political facts on the ground. As far as the military exercises in the Arctic, you know, it's fine. The Russians are just really had enough. Everyone thinks in Western media this is all a result of the Russians are annoyed because they lost Ukraine. But that's not true. The lineage goes all the way back to the beginning of the century when George W. Bush pulled out of the anti-missile defense treaty. You know, that was a really an important part of security architecture for Europe, the United States, and Russia, and George W. Bush just pulls right out of it without any kind of discussion at all. I mean, legally he could do that, but there was no consultations with the Russians. That was in 2002. That was a signal. and it goes all the way to 2015. The West is not looking for partners, and Russia will, and it will, and I'm proud of it, and I support it absolutely. It's going to defend itself. So you want to put planes in the air? You want to put submarines under sea? You want to put your ships on the sea? Fine, let's go nose to nose. You know, this is not going to solve anything.
Mm-hmm. How do you think that this changing political map of the EU will make Brussels shift their strategy towards Russia? Because they seem to be also a bit divided within Brussels.
Yeah. The crux of it, there's a two-pronged thing here. Number one, as Greece, that poor little country suffers through austerity, how in the world can the European Union be giving money to Ukraine? That is a bottomless pit of corruption. I've been to Ukraine many, many times. Corruption has a unique form, let me put it that way, in Ukraine. I mean, it's amazingly corrupt. How can the European Union, in good conscience, be funneling money into a really dubious government that is hardly democratic? I mean, they banned two of the most important political parties. Oh, so it's like the EU. You have as many elections as possible until you get the right answer. That's what they did in Ukraine. They beat up politicians, banned parties. Did you hear about this in Western media? Probably not. So it's hardly democratic. Now, looking at what's going on with the European Union, it's going to be about sanctions. The sanctions have hurt Europe far more than Russia. Far more. For Russia, it's some inconveniences. Because if you want to, but the rich people of this country just got to get on a plane and go to Paris and London and buy whatever they want. The substitution for food was done without a hitch, very smooth. And so all of your producers in Europe, and the Germans get it the worst, do you guys even understand your own self-interest? I mean, do you think the Americans really care? The Americans in Russia, they don't have any trade worth speaking of. And so you're going to follow the Americans on sanctions. That's illogical. It's not in your own self-interest. And in a situation like this, you should be increasing ties, not limiting them, because isolating Russia, what a joke. 2 weeks ago, John Kerry went to Sochi, went to Putin's house, summer house in Sochi, on his knees. Is that isolation? No, Russia will just move its money east, and that's exactly what it's done. And money there is welcomed. The Americans, it's always tainted. And the Europeans, again, without any kind of guts or morality, just follow. So, the European Union is in a huge crisis all by itself. I mean, for me, it's a moral crisis, to be honest.
We will come right back to this, the moral crisis. Let's just take a short break.